Victoria calmly walked over to one of the couches in the center of the room and quietly sat down. "You may sit," she commanded, and as she continued, it was a good thing that Zeke sat down, because what she was about to say next could have knocked him over with a feather. She slowly looked into each of the men's eyes as she said, "Dr. Bell, Inspector, and Mr. Storm, is that correct? Or should I call you Ranger?" Zeke stumbled for an answer, but finally spoke up. "Mr. is fine, ma'am." "Oh my," she continued, an American who is at a loss for words. "All right, Mr. Storm, I have read your account. I know your story, incredible as it is, and I want to tell you right now that I believe every word of it." Bell and ABBERLINE both looked at each other in shock. Of all the things they expected to hear come forth from this reclusive sovereign, this was not it. "Ma'am," Bell began, but a single gesture with her hand cut him off as she continued. "While you gentlemen have been investigating a modern crime, I have recently spent some time purveying a seemingly much older one." It was ABBERLINE who next attempted to speak, but again, a simple movement of her hand shut him down immediately. "Time is of the essence, gentlemen, so I will simply state what I have discovered as succinctly as I can." It was Zeke who first noticed a small notebook which she had, until this time, held in her hand by her side, but now produced. She continued, "This notebook contains translations of the coroner rolls for the county of Cornwall in the year of our Lord 1344, and in particular it tells a story of a Norse ship which shipwrecked on those shores. I won't bore you with all the details, but there were 5 bodies discovered in the wreck, 4 dead Norsemen, or Vikings, as Mr. Storm may know them better, and 1 strange dark-skinned individual. It is said that the dark stranger lived for a few days, but did not regain consciousness, and it was never discovered who he was or where he came from. At the time, they believed he was a Moor from Africa." By this time, there was complete confusion on the faces of both Dr. Bell and Inspector ABBERLINE. However, Zeke had read several articles out of the state of Minnesota about how some Swedes supposedly found old Norse rune stones on their farm. They were trying to claim that Vikings had been the original settlers of that area during the Middle Ages, but only Swedes or fools believed it. But now Zeke was beginning to formulate a theory. No, not really a theory, but more of a fantasy. She went even further. Now here is the truly interesting part. While there was no mention of the disposal of the bodies of the Norsemen, the priest performed a Christian burial on the stranger when he passed. Very unusual for a Moor, but what happened next was even more baffling. The priest, who was said to be nearing 60 years of age, went on a murderous rampage, not unlike some very recent events. The details of the priest's murderous intent, which I will spare you gentlemen, are somewhat explicit, but contain the murders of 12 children, as well as the deaths of at least 2 full-grown men. It eventually ended when the locals cornered the priest in his own cottage and burned it to the ground. Those who encountered the priest told tales of his ramblings, but one quote stood out to me at least. And with that she put on her glasses, opened the notebook, cleared her throat, and stated, "Ego sum deus. Immortalum sum, I am a god, I am immortal." It was at this point in her tale that Zeke let slip, "Oh my God." It was what Charlie had said to him as well as Bauer, and it haunted Zeke too. "Yes," Her Majesty replied, and looking him straight in the eye said, "When I read that part of your account, Mr. Storm, it struck a nerve. I knew I had heard that somewhere before, and somehow it chilled me to the bone. It took some time and considerable effort, but I was able to finally remember that phrase and the horror associated with it. Almost as if the Almighty himself placed that thought in my head all those years ago to fester until the right time now. You see, as a young girl, I had a very strict tutor who used to have me translate old historical records as practice for my Latin studies. One of the many texts that he had me translate was that particular coroner roll." It was Dr. Bell who seemed to forget himself, interrupting Her Majesty and stating, "A parasite. It could be some sort of parasite which somehow inflicts madness on its victims." Taking Bell's statement as a cue, Zeke promptly interjected, "And I've heard tale of Vikings making it all the way to the interior of North America, not that I've taken them as serious before. Could be the Vikings had made it to North America centuries ago and returned with a native who may have been infected by one of these parasites somehow, which then made it to the priest who went mad and began killing," Her Majesty responded. Then it was ABBERLINE's turn to say something as he dispassionately stated, "Then is it the conclusion of the group that another one of these parasites has invaded our sacred shores, infecting Mr. Storm's fellow ranger, and when he was finally gunned down, then transferring itself to the young Dr. Bauer, who was, in turn, killed by the sailor Barclay who brought it here. And then, it somehow got into Lord Stokely. But at this, Zeke interrupted the inspector mid-sentence. No, Lady Stokely, it must have infected Lady Stokely, not Lord Stokely, and she carried out the Ripper murders. And I'll bet anything that it wants to get to your majesty. For a moment, the entire room stood silent, as the enormity of what had just been said descended into the minds of those present. Then it was the brusque Scotsman who finally broke the silence, saying in a morose voice, "If it pleases Her Majesty, may I remind you that Lady Stokely is scheduled for tea this afternoon?"